So in this tutorial we're going to be making this pixelated effect which we'll be applying to the logo and then making it explode. You can apply the pixelated effect to pretty much anything. This is another motion graphic that I've been playing with, but we will be doing this logo and this explosion effect. Okay, as usual we need to be in the Fusion tab, so we will make sure our effects library is turned on by clicking at the top here. We come down to effects and we get a new Fusion composition which we drop onto the timeline. Make sure your playhead's over the comp and click the Fusion tab at the bottom. So now we're in Fusion. I'm just going to tidy up a bit. I'm going to bring in a background that I'm going to attach direct to the media out, and I'm going to drop this background to transparent. This just sets the resolution for the Fusion comp and keeps it tied in with your timeline. So first I'm going to bring in the logo. I've pre-rendered the logo just to save a bit of time. I made this logo using masks on a plain background and I piped it through Build Justice's shapeshifter macro. If you're interested in that, I'll leave a link in the description. You can go and see Bill's site and have a look at the tutorial and see how it's done. Cool. So next we're going to need to start building our particle system, which is what we use to pixelate the image. So the first node we need for that is a pImageEmitter node, and to get that we're going to press Shift and Space, type pImage and hit return, and we've got a pImageEmitter node. Because Media In was selected when I did that, it's automatically joined on, which is where it should be. With any emitter node you also need a render node, which we can grab off our hotbar here. So you want the pRender node. You pipe them together and we're going to set pRender to 2D, and we're going to look at that in our viewer. So as you can see, we've now got this sort of grid system on our logo. This is basically lots and lots and lots and lots of pixels, all very tiny, all very close together. So whilst it's kind of what we're after, it doesn't look right, it doesn't look like the sort of pixelated effect that we want. So to get, or to start to get that, we're going to actually make our own pixel. At the minute these are just 1 pixel dots, but we're going to make pixels that are images. So as well as taking the image from our logo for the actual design, we're also going to use another image for our pixels, but we're going to make that image, and we're going to make that image by first grabbing and bringing in a background. Now with our background selected, we're going to come over to the inspector, to the image tab, which is the second tab. We're going to uncheck auto resolution, and we're going to type in these 2 boxes here 256 in each. What that will do is it will make this background node a square that is 256 pixels by 256 pixels. So now we are going to add an ellipse mask to our square to make it into a circle, and we're going to bring that ellipse mask pretty much out to the sides of the square. Now black dot, a bit boring, so we're going to make a little apparent sphere, and to do that we're going to add a gradient to the background. So again, select your background, come to the first colour tab, change solid colour to gradient, and then on the gradient type we want radial. Now at the minute, if we grab and move the start and end points of our radial gradient, they're kind of the wrong way around. We want darker edges and light in the middle. So the easiest way to do that is if you come to your gradient bar, click the first arrow that's currently black and just change it to white. Then come to the last arrow, click it so it turns white, and where it is currently white colour, make it black. And now you can see you've got sort of a pseudo sphere, if you like, that you can adjust to your sort of taste. You can also use these sliders to sort of, if you want to, bring things in a bit. The downside to that is because this isn't white, then our image that we get from our render is going to be darker than the image and the media in, so you don't want to make this too dark. So there we go. So that's going to be our pixel. Now we need to get this pixel into our emitter, and at the minute there's no input for it. So if you come back to your pImageEmitter, go to the third tab along, the style tab, and at the minute style is set to point. What I'm going to do is change it to bitmap, and if you watch the node while I do it, you'll see a new input appears. So this input is for your particle image. Now if we put our renderer back in the viewer, we get this. So what you've got here, if you look, you can see the roundness from our spheres, but at the minute the spheres are really big and there's lots of them, so you're not getting the pixelation effect. So if we just come and zoom that to fit, you can see your logo, and you can also see that it's darker, as I mentioned, because our spheres aren't white. So the first thing we're going to address is the size of our pixels. So if you come into your pImageEmitter node, we're still on the style tab, and if you come down to where it says size controls and just hit the little arrow, now we're going to drop the size right down. In this instance a size of 0.04 works quite well. The next thing we're going to do is come over to the controls tab, and we're going to reduce the density, i.e. the number of pixels, and again in this instance we want 0.15 for X and Y density. What you'll also notice is now our pRender node is a damn sight quicker, and that's because we've got fewer pixels for it to work with. So this is now our kind of logo. If we play it back from the beginning, you can see that we still have our logo animation, but everything's pixelated. And that's basically, if you could stop there and you'd have your sort of pixelated logo. So, but we want to make it nicer, and we're going to add the explosion at the end. Now we're going to add the explosion at frame 96, or from frame 96 should I say. What's happened there, if you notice, as we pass frame 100, everything disappears. The reason everything's disappeared is if you come back to your inspector, you've got this lifespan here that's set to 100. So basically the pixels are born at frame 0, they come in, and everything dies at frame 100. But that's fine because we only need this particular part of our animation to run up to frame 96 anyway. If you wanted to leave it here, all you'd do is you would increase the lifespan to at least the length of your comp, which in my case is 191, but I'm not going to because I don't need to. So we now have our logo coming in, our image emitter, our renderer with our homemade particle, and this is the result. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to make a duplicate image or particle system, sorry. The reason I'm doing that is, in theory, if you're in the pImageEmitter, once you get to frame 96 you should be able to keyframe the velocity and get the particles to start moving around, but every time I've tried it, it doesn't work. It either works and messes up the first part of the animation, or it just doesn't work. So the workaround I've found is to just duplicate the image, the image emitter and renderer, so that we have two sets. What we're going to do is have one that works from frame 0 to frame 96. That will then turn off, and then the second set will turn on at frame 97 and go through to the end, and that will be our explosion. So to turn this system off at frame 96, we go into pRender. If you come into the inspector at the top, you've got global in out, and you simply drop the out down to 96. So now when it renders, we'll have our logo up to frame 96, and then as we hit frame 97 it turns itself off. So now for the second part of our animation, I'm going to take the image emitter and the renderer, select them both, Command and C to copy, click outside, Command and V to paste. Now at the minute these two are identical to these two, but what we want is we want this bit of the animation to run to the end of our composition. To do that, we're going to come into pRender1_1, which is our copy, and if you see at the top it's still set to 0 to 96. We're just going to grab the middle of this bar here and bang it all the way over to the other side. So now it will come in fact it needs to be adjusted a bit. We need to set it to come in at 97. So if we now put this one in the viewer, you'll see nothing because you've got no image piped into it. So what we're going to do, just bring it over a bit. We're going to bring our logo and just put it on the other side. We're going to grab a second output with our right mouse button over pImageEmitter1_1, release, and now you get this selection, and because it's our main graphic, it's going into the input. What we're also going to do is we're going to grab a second input from our sphere that we made, again with the right mouse button over the pImageEmitter1_1, release, and because our input's already taken, our only option is our style bitmap, so we'll do that. So now if we're currently on frame 96, so this system isn't active, but if we come to frame 97 we now have our logo back. So if we now bring them onto our main path and put the output through the window, you'll see that our logo continues, but as we hit 96 nothing happens. But what has actually happened, if you watch, you can see that this side is now flashing away like a Christmas tree, whereas before frame 96 caged so you can't see it. Before frame 96 this side was working, and then at frame 96 this side takes over. So that's great. But we don't just want the logo to carry on, what we want it to do now is to explode. So if we come back to frame 97, so this particle system's off and this particle system is working. So we're going to go into pImageEmitter 1-1 and we are going to animate the particles so that they explode out. And to do that we come to velocity. We change the velocity value to 0.2. We change the velocity variance value to 0.2. We change the angle Z to -90. And we change the angle variance to 10. Oops, sorry, 10. And the angle Z variance to 10. What those variances do is, because we're working on a grid system, as this explodes out you get quite a distinct line across the middle, both horizontal and vertical. This variance just muddies that line up so you don't see it. So that is our whole animation system set up. So if we now come to the beginning, you'll see that it animates through our logo. Your logo stays for a little while so that people can see who you are, and then as you hit frame 96 it explodes. And then those particles over the sort of 4 seconds will gradually thin out and disappear. The other thing that we can do that just helps a little bit is if you come into your second P render, so the one we've currently got on the right hand side, and you've got a box here that says kill particles that leave view, just check it. Basically what that does is, as the explosion happens and particles come off the edge of the screen, by checking on this the computer stops caring about them. It just doesn't compute them anymore. So you're only computing what you can actually see, so it just speeds things up a little bit. Okay, so that's our basic system. What we're going to do now is just nicen it up a little bit, and I'm going to go back to 2 viewers, and I'm going to put our original logo in so we can compare. As you can see, this is quite bright, this is quite muted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select pRender1, which is our original particle system, and I'm going to add a brightness and contrast node, which you can drag from your hotbar here. If you press and hold the shift button, hit the middle line, and then that pipes it in automatically for you. So with our brightness and contrast selected, we've got all our settings in the inspector, and we're just going to play around with them to brighten things up a bit. Now what you see is, as I brighten the image, it's not only brightening our logo, but it's also brightening the background, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take an output from pRender, which is our logo, and we're going to pipe it into the blue mask input of our brightness and contrast. So what that means now is the brightness and contrast is only affecting our logo, and it's leaving the background alone. So again, we can come back and we can try and get it as close as we can to the original. You might be able to bring the gain up slightly. Mess around with your contrast. That's not a bad approximation. As I say, you can mess around with these to your heart's content till you get it as spot on as you want it. What I'm now going to do is basically copy and paste that node over here, but I'm going to do it as an instance node, so that if we need to make any changes, we only need to change one of the nodes, and then the other one will reflect those changes. So select your brightness and contrast, Command C to copy it, and then Shift Command and V to paste an instance. You've got this little green line that joins them together. So again, we can now shift and bring this over to our lines change colour and let go, and then it automatically connects it in. What that's going to do is add the same sort of brightness and contrast lift to our exploding particles, just so you don't see a sudden jump in brightness as you come over from 96 to 97. The last thing I'm going to add in is some sort of glow. Now when I first played with this, I actually used a glow node, but what I found was that as I added the glow, it softened the pixelation, so the sort of individual pixels started to blur together, which kind of negated the point of going to all the trouble of getting the pixels there in the first place. Again, another kind of alternative I found was to use the rays node, so shift space, type ray, and hit the rays node. Now as you can see, that's kind of slight overkill, so with your rays node selected, you need to start tweaking your settings. And again, these are all to your preference as to how you want them to look or not look. I think if you keep them quite understated, you get enough of a glow, but not an exaggeration of the rays. And again, just for consistency, we can do the same thing. Select your rays node, Command and copy, click in an empty space, Shift Command and paste with V, and you get another instance, and then Shift and drag it in till your line colour changes. And again, you've got the same sort of level of glow on your explosion. And that is it. So what we've got, to recap, we've got our logo is media 1, media in 1 is your logo, which we then piped into 2 pImageEmitters and 2 pRenderers. The first pImageEmitter and renderer work up to frame 96. The second pImageEmitter and renderer work from frame 97 and give the explosion effect. And then we added some brightness and contrast and rays just to sort of jazz it up a bit. Okay, just realised I was just double checking the tutorial, and I realised that I hadn't actually masked our second render system. We put a mask on this one to stop the background getting brighter. At the minute, I think that mask is affecting the instance, so what we need to do is just take an output from prender on 1_1 and pipe it into the mask input of our brightness instance, and then it just stops the sort of brightening of the background, and it keeps the brightness of our pixels sort of consistent. So just, yeah, sorry, just a little something I missed, but it's back in now. Cheers. I hope you found this educational, useful or entertaining. Please consider subscribing, hit the like button and the bell notification, and I will catch you on the next one. Cheers.